Well, good afternoon, everybody. I was told by Don I have to immediately start because we have to stay on time, be on time. You know the thing. Um, my name is Rodney Ridley. I am Vice President at Alvernia University, and I get the pleasure of hosting this afternoon's President's Panel. When, as most of you know, the Innovation Conference was formed around the notion of trying to shed light on the great innovative things that are happening in the Northeast Pennsylvania region, some regional pride. What are the things that are happening around various topics? We've had several conferences around a variety of topics. This one is probably one of my favorites, which is what kind of innovative and exciting things are happening around the notion of education. And there's no better way to hear about that than from some of our great educational institution leaders that we have up here. We have a very diverse group of leaders up here of all kinds of backgrounds, a diverse group of institutions, community colleges, four-year institutions, publics, privates, the whole nine yards. And I've asked each of the presidents to introduce themselves and to sort of give some background. I want to make sure all of you understood and sort of put some context on this before we get started. One of the things that we did when Don and I had a long conversation about this panel years, I don't know, it's been 2 years now, Don, didn't go when we first wanted to go. The topic pre-COVID was institutions of higher education are now under tremendous pressure, right? From all sorts of aspects, right? And it's going to take innovative leaders to make their institutions thrive and survive. COVID just lit a fire and accelerated that, right? Now institutions of higher education are really sort of under pressure. And it's going to be interesting to see the ones that do and don't survive and the ones that do and don't thrive. And our previous speaker even pointed out that, this generation is the largest generation, but yet the amount of students available to go to college is declining, especially in this region, right? So I'm going to now turn this over to our panel, and I've asked them to do two things. One, the Webster rule, which is to stay on time. They are college presidents that are used to having the mic, so don't abuse it. And to introduce themselves and to start off by telling one thing that they as an institution are doing to combat what we all know is a very interesting time in higher education. So we can start right here.
There we go. Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Liz Wright. I am the chancellor at Penn State Hazleton. I've been at Penn State now for 23 years, and I've been chancellor at Penn State Hazleton for about 45 days. Thank you. My fun fact is that I am the first female chancellor, actually the second female chancellor at Penn State Hazleton. We previously had a woman more than 25 years ago who lasted 6 weeks, and so I'm very proud to say that I have eclipsed her. So I am at 45 days, the longest serving female chancellor at Penn State Hazleton. That's my claim to fame. You asked us to think about kind of the status or the state of higher education right now, and I'll just give you one word, which I think it is that we are evolving, and maybe I would add to that we are changing, which of course is the same thing. And what I would say about Penn State Hazleton and what I'm most proud of right now, we just had that great talk on sort of different generations and how we interact together. And I can say with confidence that at Hazleton I have a multi-generational team. I also would say I have the best team here in the Northeast, and I'm incredibly proud to get to work and to be with them every day. I think that what we're really focused on right now in the context of evolving as an institution and as a campus is really this concept of how we take some of the fundamental principles of entrepreneurship and apply them both in the credit space. So you may have heard Joe Rinaldi, who's out in the audience, talk a little bit earlier about our very innovative engineering program and alternative forms or non-oil-based forms of energy. It might mean in terms of our academic spaces, where we have things such as maker spaces and places where we really encourage students from the first day to be creative and innovative. It might mean that we've embraced entrepreneurship in our coursework in terms of collaborative relationships we've established with universities throughout the world in order to give our students an opportunity to talk and speak with others, both about entrepreneurship, but also about kind of cultural impacts on that topic in general. And last but not least, I would be remiss if I didn't say that in terms of our entrepreneurship, one of the things we are incredibly proud of is our Launchbox. And that is specifically our incubator in which we work with local folks in our area and with local agencies and businesses to think about how we encourage and support and help people in the Northeast who come to us with this idea and help them transition it all the way down to the road to a successful business. So I'll pause there.
John Loyack, Alvernia University. You might wonder why an institution from Reading is here. And it's because I'm a hometown boy. I grew up in Pittston. Some of you will remember me from my time at King's College. A lot of familiar faces, so great to see everyone. I would go right to what is higher ed. I would say you better know your customer, right? And a student and the family that they represent is a customer. You can pull away from that all you want, but at the end of the day, they're a customer. In fact, the presentation that just was given gave you a roadmap as to what the customer wants. They want to be part of a value-driven culture. We are a Franciscan Catholic university that teaches 5 core values around peacemaking and collegiality and togetherness and service in the community. And so part of the reason we've been successful is we provide that because that's what they want. We also believe that you got to know your customer and you got to know the outcome that they're looking for. So you need to build your programming suite around what it is they want to do when they grow up, or there's no reason for them to come and spend 4 or 5 years with you. So we are a doctoral professional university. That's not my classification, that's Carnegie, with 4 colleges offering technical programs that students and families desire with job outcomes and a prescription to get to the job outcome, because everything we do is experiential learning, so they're out with the employer long before they're ever going to get the job offer and developing that job offer over 4 and 5 years. They want to be entrepreneurs. We run a pretty sizable student-driven business incubator that's part of the Ben Franklin Network, another reason why we're here, that has been enormously successful in our community. In 2 years, even though the first part of that was in COVID shutdown, we've served over 200 small businesses and entrepreneurs. We have 7 businesses in large-scale funding. We've built funding mechanisms, and our students are the people working with the entrepreneurs and the small businesses creating the result. 50 student fellows, that's what we call them, working with graduate students who lead a team, because they're the we generation. They want to work together. They want to be entrepreneurs, and we let them loose. So if you're with us 2 years, because that's as long as this has really gone on, you probably have seen 5 or 6 different entrepreneurs or small businesses. You've worked on all the things that you need to work on to solve them. They have a mentor network around them. So when they get stuck, they can go to the law firm, the accounting firm, SCORE, National SCORE, whatever it is, and they solve the problems. What did we hear today? They like to solve problems, right? So you better gear your education to that group if you want to be successful and survive. You better know your customer and create that kind of environment. That's where I think you thrive. There's another piece of that that's related to the community, and I won't go into it too much other than to say, if you can provide that kind of experience, you're going to do it by building hundreds of partnerships. Because if I'm going to put you with the employer along the way, not just an internship, but project work, and we bring employers into our academic facilities to be partners 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, so that you can just walk out of my communication program in a classroom and walk into a TV studio and do programming. And that's just one example. I could give you 100. But those partnerships are critical. In higher ed, we generally talk about partnerships internally. How do we partner with each other? How does the community college have an articulation agreement with the four-year? You know what? We're terrible as partners in higher education, and it took me about 3 minutes as a business person to figure that out. Where the rubber meets the road on partnerships is business, the community, and if you want to raise the resource to have the experience you want to give your students, there's no way to do it without those partnerships. So know your customer, build those partnerships.
What he said. I'm Jill Murray. I'm the President and Chief Innovation Officer at Lackawanna College, and it's a privilege to be with all of you today up here. I think, for us at Lackawanna College, we're a largely commuter-based institution, and I think along with partnerships in industry and businesses across our region, it is just as important for us to think about what kind of social and economic impact we have as an institution. And so how are we participating in our communities? How are we participating in being good corporate citizens, in teaching our students how to be good partners and how to be good citizens as well? And that requires us to be able to teach our students how to think differently. And every college, makes that claim. And I think we all do a really good job of that. It is a very difficult climate now to do that in. And so it's a delicate balance, and it's very often a tightrope walk to be able to do that. And so we, in our civil discourse, in our public discourse, we really have to be mindful of how we verbalize having a social and economic impact. I think the value of partnerships is immeasurable. And I think the future of higher education is going to be 1,000% dependent on the success of those partnerships, both public and private. I think for us, the way that we're thinking about models of education is certainly along some of the lines that we heard today. The Penn State Schuylkill presentation was phenomenal, fantastic. Those co-op programs are essential. What we're trying to do inside Lackawanna is build micro co-ops, kind of like mini co-ops, where we have businesses located inside our college, and where students will do those little mini rotations inside those businesses as a matter of course. So it's it's theory and practical application, right? The presenter just before talked about the Gen Z student wanting to practice what they know, practice what they understand. That is a critical component for us. And so if we can help students learn how to do that at scale, I think there's nothing that this generation can't accomplish as they go forward, and the generations behind them. So Lackawanna College is proud to, be a part of that civil discourse and focus on the importance of social and economic impact at a very large scale. Thank you.
Everything they said, in a way. Good afternoon, John Pullo. I'm the interim president from Keystone College. I'm a week and a half into the job. But I've spent 11 years on the board of Keystone, obviously as an alum. I'm a proud alum of the college, and what I might refer to as a lifelong learner. So I'm coming into this looking at it through that lens. When I graduated from Keystone back in 1969, and I think dinosaurs were still walking the earth back then. I don't even know if Gen Z was thought about at the time, but as a practical matter, got into the workforce, did a lot of really interesting things in my career, but my educational development lagged. I'm a classic late bloomer. Got my baccalaureate degree probably 12 years later than when I should have, according to the track that most people go through. Got an MBA, it was 6 years after that, and got my last master's degree when I was 50. So I'm a huge advocate of lifelong learning, and the process that we're going through today that is somewhat being characterized as a process where we really need to have an end-to-end opportunity for individuals coming into the learning environment, which could start with something as simple as certificate programs and things of that nature, all the way up to potentially masters and beyond. Really, it's a process of self-discovery, and that's what I think I bring to the college in addition to my 50 years of business experience. So one of the things I've been thinking very deeply about is the whole concept of customer, and it was brought up at least once already by the panel, but certainly students are, and their parents are our customers, but the customers of our customers are really what we need to focus on. So how we really create the talent pipeline for our ultimate end customers, those who hire our students, really become the critical perspective or lens that we should be looking through. And I've heard a lot of things today that really have energized me in terms of how to work through that process, whether it's co-op programs, preparing students for the workplace, things of that nature. All of that is pretty important to me. The second part of it is product, and I'd really like to focus on product. As a business guy, I'm always interested in the numbers, obviously, but it's also the quality of the product. And I would like to be able to move the college forward from a position of strength, let's say the strengths that we have in the various curricula that we offer to our students and the like, and build upon that and build the institutional strengths that we need outside to the external customers that we have. And I think that's really the measure of where we need to be, at least in terms of moving the college forward. We all are under stress today, especially let's say the segment of a higher education stratum that is in the small nonprofit liberal arts arena, and there's probably 1,000 of us out there, many of whom are in trouble, many of whom may not even survive the next 20 years. So affiliations and partnerships, not only with business and industry, but among educational institutions, are going to be an important part of where we need to go. So I don't know if I have anything brilliant to say today, since I'm so new in the job, but as a practical matter, I think I do bring some additional perspectives that could be helpful, at least in terms of my leadership role at Keystone, and certainly those who follow. So thank you.
All right. So that's a good opening by everybody, and I'll piggyback off of what John just said. For the way we'll do this is I've got 2 or 3 questions I'm going to ask, and then I want to leave it open to the audience so you guys can be thinking about questions that you might have as we move this forward. But John, you mentioned that there are a lot of smaller, what I call regional institutions of higher education, smaller institutions that are focused on a region. Each one of you up here on the panel represent an institution like that. And there's a lot of information, a lot of data out there that says that the large publics and the sort of elite privates are not in the same financial sort of issue that some of the regional institutions are. And I know it's a bad word in higher education, but I'm going to use it anyway. So maybe I have to wash my mouth out with soap afterwards. But education at institutions of higher education this size is almost becoming like a commodity, right? There's a lot of supply and little demand, right? Just declining demand. My question for each of you is, given that environment, which we all know is true, and there are institutions closing. You can look at the PASHE system, you can look various places, institutions of higher education, which never really ever closed before and never were under this pressure, are now under that pressure. And each of you has the distinct pleasure of running an institution and worrying about this. Give me a quick and sort of one area where you think that under your leadership, your institution is going to distinguish itself in order to make it survive and thrive. One area, what will distinguish your institution? And anybody can start, we don't have to go in order. And I know some of you have only been in the job for about 37 minutes, so you're not sure where the bathroom is, so this is more strategic thinking than operational excellence. But where you would put your time, energy, and focus on if you had to say one place. What's going to distinguish you? What's the magic?
So for us, and you know this because you're part of the team, is return on investment, right? So I'm not an educator by training or an academic. I'm a business person. So every day we come in as a leadership team and say, how are we creating a return on the investment a family and student are making? They're spending a lot of time with us, 4 to 5 years, depending on the program. Certainly a lot of money with us. Although we're not the highest price institution, we are not inexpensive. And so that is where, in my view, the rubber meets the road. And so I think definitionally, the place you get return on investment, and my liberal arts brethren will not be happy with me for saying it, but I'm a business person, is technical programs with job outcomes that have salaries that justify the investment in your institution. So if you have that, if you have values, if you create team, if you create we, if there's a lot of mentoring and support, you make them successful. We're seeing success rates and retention at 80% levels in what we're doing. Then there's a return on investment, and there's a reason for you to pick me. Or pick Alvernia University as the place to get your education, because that return is very visible. You can walk around our modern state-of-the-art facilities and it looks a lot different than other institutions like ours. And if you're doing it right, you have the resources to be able to have bright and shiny new facilities and new technical programs that continue to attract students to you. Even today, there's a buggy whip manufacturer out there somewhere making really nice buggy whips for people who still like horse and buggies, even though the automobile has been around since the early 1900s or whenever, right? So higher education will never go that way, because technical training and education is always critical to the success of our economy and us as human beings, as thinkers and interactors. But there are going to be less of us, so you better be that really good buggy whip manufacturer to make sure that you're one of the ones that survive. And you can pick up the Wall Street, as a business guy, every morning at 5 a.m. I'm on the electronic version of the Wall Street Journal reading what's going on in the world. And at least twice a week, there's an institution that's merging or going out of existence. And we're just getting to the hard part of the demographics that are in front of higher education. I also think there's a bit of scale to it, and that's part of our vision. We believe you have to be a certain scale to have a much better chance to survive. So that means new technical programs that attract the next wave of students in the kind of environment they want to be in with successful outcomes. That has been our recipe. We think it works. We've been at it 3 classes. Each of them have been the largest classes in the university's history. So that is, I'm a business guy, I have to go back to a benchmark in data. That's why I think it works.
Thank you all. Thanks, Rodney. I think the electric buggy whip is probably what's next, and we can all agree that you're right, John. I think, what is next, and the technical pieces of education are going to matter most in this next wave, in this next phase of higher education. But I think as much as it is important to have in-demand programs and relevancy in industry and business and partnerships, it also has to be, and our focus, I think, is about the experience of the student while they're there. This generation, as you heard, requires and is wanting personal touch. They want an experience. They want a relationship. They don't want a transaction, right? They want a meaningful set of experiences throughout their time in higher ed. And that's hard to do. It's an expensive model, and it's hard to replicate at scale. So that's a challenge, I think, for all of us here. But I think it's really important to think about that relational aspect of higher ed and not the transaction only. It's not just about the job at the end, right? It's about how you make them feel while they're there, how you teach them to think, how you make them better people, and that they realize that. That's part of the return on investment. It's the job at the end is certainly important, but it's also the experience while they're there.
I had a really great career working for a highly technical company who made life safety devices for the military. And the one thing I learned in that process was the value of interdisciplinary knowledge. And my sense is that training students along a singular line of thought misses the point, because this is a really diverse world, not only in terms of the people that are in it, but specifically because of the intersection of technologies and intersection of thought that goes along with what drives businesses, what drives profit, what drives technical growth, what drives investment. So we're talking about 360-degree perspectives in the world that I think only come about by enriching the lives of our students, by having them see as much as they possibly can about different areas of science, different areas of political thought, different areas of the whole spectrum of things that really make us more valuable not only in the workplace but in our lives. And I really think that's the driver. So that's why I'm looking desperately at the product as well as the customer, because I really believe at the end of the day, having as broad a view of the landscape as possible from an educational perspective and an interdisciplinary perspective, that will make a difference. When I was at the University of Pennsylvania, they started a program called Penn Integrates Knowledge, and what they did was hire professors specifically to have appointments in more than one school in the college. And I think that thought is something that can be carried out writ large, maybe not in the context of Keystone at the level that Penn could do it, but certainly at least the thought in terms of our ability to enrich each other's lives by the things that we do and bring them to each other in ways that would make us useful.
So I would say that at Penn State Hazleton and really at all of the Penn State campuses, we are focused on delivering the land grant mission to our communities. And within that, we focus on access and affordability. And I'll start with that affordability piece. We acknowledge that in our communities, higher education is often for some families a very, very difficult challenge and hurdle to overcome the cost in order to obtain access. And so we're really focused on how we create pipelines that enable students to have that access and how we follow up that access with good financial support to help a student attain a Penn State degree. I think at the same time in our community, we're really acknowledging how it is changing. And specifically in Hazleton, that means that we've had a dramatic influx of a Latino community that is vibrant and is very, very dedicated to education. And so one of the things that we're really thinking about at a campus such as mine is how do we make sure that all of our members of our community can participate? And that for us means being able to communicate both in Spanish and in English, and making sure that we really embrace that access mission for all of our students.
So this is my last question, and I'll open it up to the audience to do it. And I'm going to ask the audience to agree with me with the panel so that they can really open it up. We're all going to sign non-disclosure agreements so that whatever they say up here won't leave the room, right? It's Vegas, the room's Vegas, so you can, whatever you want to say here won't ever leave the room, and your contemporaries won't take your idea, okay? So we agree on that one. It's my contention, and many of you would probably agree with me, that higher education as a institution, as a place where students will grow and change lives or whatever, has been doing their form of business the same way since the 1300s, 1400s, right? I mean, you can actually look in history books and you will see some professor standing up in front of a board, right, waxing eloquently to a group of students sitting in chairs, right? My contention is that the evolution of higher education, or the really revolutionary thing, has been, well, it's now might not be a man standing up in front of the board. It might be a woman. It might be somebody else. And the students sitting in the audience are not all men anymore, right? So it's more of a diverse group. But if you walk into an institution, and guarantee you all are theirs right now, and there's a class going on, there's somebody standing up in front of a board, waxing eloquently. Now, our major innovation has been PowerPoint, right? We don't do chalk anymore, we do PowerPoint. And COVID brought out the really revolutionary thing. We now do it over Zoom, right? Heavy lifting, right? But as an institution, John brought it up about buggy whips. We're still making buggy whips, and it's 2022, right? My question to you is, as really educated individuals who have really visionary leaders, each of you, there's something in your mind that says, here's how I'm going to compete and win. Here's how my institution is going to do something that's not just some small tweak. We aren't going to go from PowerPoint to Zoom. We're going to do this revolutionary thing, not evolutionary. It's not iPhone 11 to iPhone 12. It's iPhone 12 to some device that you don't need, that it's in your brains, right? So something revolutionary. Give us the one thing, whether it's something you can or can't pull off, but the revolutionary thing that you think that higher education needs to do, or your institution is planning to do, to change the game. Game changer. I want the game changer. And again, you could give it to us, and we're not going to let the secret out. We won't let the secret out.
How about collaboration? That's the one thing we need to do.
What do you mean?
I mean, colleges collaborate, educational institutions collaborating with one another across the board. That's, to me, you know, going back to the business context, so we talked about demographics, right? And we have fewer students in the classroom than we did before as a result of the lower birth rates, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this is like trying to gain market share in a declining market. That's not going to work. So going back to the interdisciplinary issue again, why not faculty appointments at different colleges? Why not shared services? Why not finding collaborative ways where we leverage the strengths of universities and colleges around that would make a difference and rise all boats rather than finding ways to continue to compete with one another? That, to me, would be a better solution.
Nice. Okay.
I think we would change our approach to time, in that we are very traditional in terms of when we are most likely to be fully populated, from August to May. And we are very traditional in terms of what we march a student towards at the end of a 4-year experience. So 120 credits, earning a baccalaureate degree, et cetera. I think we would look very seriously and honestly at micro-credentials, at shorter certificate credentials, and we would give students the fluidity and flexibility to define time with us.
I like it.
I think all of those things are critically important. We're terrible collaborators with each other. We need to be better at every level, right? In every area of our community. I think micro-credentials are absolutely scalable, laddered opportunities are absolutely going to become lifelong learning opportunities for sure. I think the other piece that could be game-changing, and that needs to happen, as much as higher ed has not changed, although I think some of us have started to change toward competency-based models and experiential learning, the K through 12 system has not changed. And that, I think, is some of the biggest opportunities for collaboration and partnerships that need to happen. We need to start thinking differently about how students get prepared for college, about their readiness for college, about what they expect from college, and what we need to understand is what they expect from us. And so that collaboration back and forth with K through 12, which is a struggling industry, really needs to, we need to work together to help to change some of those models, change some of that traditional thought. That is an industry, if you woke up in 1900 and today, it's the exact same model, almost, in K through 12. And that's where some of the problems lie. That there isn't a harder job in the world today, in my opinion, than being a teacher or an administrator in a K through 12 district. It's unbelievable how difficult that is today. And I think for us, for the colleges and universities, particularly in our region where you have public school districts with 85+% poverty rates in Scranton and Hazleton and Wilkes-Barre, we need to start thinking differently about how we collaborate with and pull together, each other up. A rising tide lifts all boats, as John said. And I think that K through 12 focus is going to be a game changer.
I think that's so on point. So I've been in higher education for a decade, and you can see a measurable difference, and then COVID, of course, accelerated it, in the gap between the student arriving at your institution with a high school education and what they really need to be able to perform at a university. And so when people talk about the cost of rising higher education costs, part of that cost is we have to build a bridge to get you ready to be college ready. Yet that historically has not been part of the cost structure of a college or a university. Students were arriving ready for college. That just isn't the case. So that we need, if we're going to be successful, if we're going to have 80% retention rates, if we're going to fill the workforce needs, we're going to have the type of experience we want for students to be successful. Therefore, you can't be successful and get a return on investment without completing your degree. We have to fill the gap. No one ever talks about that. That's not my answer to the question, but that is a excellent point, and one, frankly, I think all of our institutions continue to struggle with, is how do we put resources in place just to get you ready to where you should have been when you arrived on my campus as a freshman ready to take classes. So my real answer to the question is experiential learning. So, and Rodney knows that answer too. I think everybody at Alvernia walks around with those words on their lips every day. I want less time for students in the classroom and more time for students out doing what it is they want to do. One, make sure that it's really what they want to do while they have time to explore a few other things along the way. And more importantly, it makes them really good at doing it. So if I'm going to give you a real return on investment, you, unlike how you might have come into my institution needing some bridge education to get in the classroom and be successful, I don't want that when you get into your first job. My job is to make sure, we like to say, application ready. It's not my phrase, it's Rodney's phrase, but it's right on point. I want you to walk off that stage, I hand you your diploma, I give you a hug, I shake your hand, I take your picture. That's our tradition. And you're gonna start that job the next day, and you are already down the road to doing it. It's why we're gearing we started, this is the fourth year of an administration, someday it feels like 40. But we started with about 60% of our students getting an internship in their field. So we quickly set a goal to say, well, that's not good enough. We're not giving a return on investment if 40% of our kids aren't even getting experience in what they want to do. So we raised that to 100, and in 2 years we got there. And halfway through that process, we said, that's not really good enough. So how do we build partners into our programs so that you can walk out of the classroom and get experiential learning? So you can walk into the incubator as an engineer and mock up a product with an entrepreneur, right? You can walk into the television station, you can walk into a clinic and do clinical hours and never have to leave our campus. And by the way, you are going to leave because you all do internships, and 40% of our students are health science, so they do a lot of clinical rotations by design. But we're trying to make everything like that so that when students leave, they've had a broad base of experience. So you may not ever be an entrepreneur and have worked in a business incubator with business. It just makes you a good, well-rounded thinker and gives you some real life experience to lean on when you get into a business, or you start a business, or you do whatever you're going to do with your career. The more they can get their hands dirty and learn. And I think the one thing we didn't say about this generation is they're a little afraid to make a mistake. I think we were a little more fearless and you know, I was in that first generation group they talked about, because we came from the great generation, right? It was a little more, you know, we were a little more on our own. We had a little bit more freedom. We made mistakes. Nobody really knew about it. You figured out how to work your way through it. We didn't really I didn't let my children do that, and they're in their late 20s and early 30s. They grew up differently. So if we can give you experiential learning and you can make a few mistakes, I always say in the business incubator, students learn as much from an entrepreneur who fails as they do from one who succeeds, because they see failure, they know what it's like. And we like to say, well, we accelerate the process for them to get to the next idea. And, you know, entrepreneurs usually try 5 or 6 times before they find something that is really a business, right? So that's just an example. So I think, to me, that's the differentiator. Is I want you in the classroom, yes, but I want you out in the field doing it. We do it with values and service. All of our students do community service for that reason. It's experiential learning of the values. I could just talk to you about values. We could have a nice program on values. You could learn it in the classroom. We start everything with a mission moment. But what about bringing it to life? And then that creates students who are already engaged in the community and already have that spark. How many of you found that spark for the first time outside of your college education, right? We want to make sure they get it in their community savvy, and they already know where they want to connect in a community, because that's part of the experience. It's also nice for the community. That was way too long of an answer, so my apologies.
All right, so I'm doing good. I'm going to get an A from Don here. I'm doing good. I'm on time. So, questions from the audience. You got a distinguished panel here. We want to hear from the audience. What do you want to ask them?
So I think you guys, in the diversity of your background, certainly stands out in listening to you. And I'm a little familiar with the model, just given my experience with Lackawanna. But the opportunity to me, as I listen to the 4 of you speak, is, so you referenced the sort of the big publics and the Ivies, the endowment schools, right? The disconnect at that level, and I've attended a couple of them, so I've seen it. The disconnect between price versus value for the educational experience and the skill set and the decision making that you walk away with is often astounding, which is an opportunity, I think, for that regional university. But how do you change how you're viewed by the customer and the customer of the customer, so that going to your universities versus that traditional route that comes with sort of all the cliche, the bumper stickers and that cachet, how do you fight that battle, which is essentially a marketing exercise in many ways, before you can get them into the door to show them that ROI?
Anybody want to take that on? Marketing, your university. How are you going to do it to this generation to separate yourself? How are you doing it?
Thanks for the question, Michael.
Thanks.
That's a hard answer, I think, to give. Social media is certainly a vehicle through which you can affect lots at scale, opinions and thoughts about what's happening at each of our institutions. I think it really is, I'll speak for Lackawanna, the long history we've had, some of the challenges we've had with public perception and how we've turned that around, and the transformation we've undergone has been chipping away, right? Highlighting, those little wins all the time, constantly, admitting where we've made mistakes and being forthright about where we're going. So I think that level of transparency is really for us, without having huge marketing budgets and resources that some of these bigger colleges you're talking about have. We have to be very judicious with how we're spending our dollars from a marketing perspective, because usually it's confined to enrollment, or many of us are looking at enrollment-based marketing. So that goodwill, those good stories, those ability to be able to tell the stories effectively, chipping away little by little, and again, being transparent about when we make mistakes, what are the things that we're not doing well, and how do we change that, and being forthright about how we go forward.
I would say that you have to have, you said value equation, and I love that. So we have this thought process of be priced in the middle of your peer group, but have the experience be at the top end of your peer group. And if you're doing that, we market, don't get me wrong. You heard the expert on this generation. They have so much data in front of them. If you're really doing that, if your product is really effectively underpriced because it's so good relative to what they have to pay, they figure it out, right? And they talk for you. I can tell you, and then others notice. So then you're nationally recognized by this organization or this scoring body, or, for us, the big thing was we really want to be a regional comprehensive university, and without the Carnegie classification, there was no way to do that. And that meant programming and success. And that programming and success now speaks for itself. So when students go out on the website, that information is there. It is communicated in the community. We're always, the Berk's best university. So it really, if you do it right, a lot of it speaks for itself. And this generation is going to go out and find it. You can't hide it. And I think you're absolutely right. If you make a mistake or you're not doing something well, you ought to be honest about it and talk about your plan for corrective action. The other thing I would say about this generation is they're pretty good if you put a plan out in front of them that says you're going to address it, to give you a little space to go address it, right? If you screw it up enough, they'll lose faith. But frankly, if you're honest and you give it an honest try and you put an honest plan in front of them to fix it, they're very responsive. But to me, I think it's got to be, you've got to have that value equation. And when people start to see that and the word starts to get out, that's how you compete at the next level.
You got a question in the back? Mike.
The question on accreditation. Mike McHale, I'm the owner of Production Systems Automation. We hire a lot of engineers, and the engineers that come into our business learn a lot of things in college that are not applicable to real life. So when the student comes to us, we spend 2 or 3 years training them to actually be an engineer. And I've been told that the problem with that is the accreditation process that the universities have to go through. And I'm sure any of the other degrees probably have the same problem. How do we change that outdated system as well? Because that's a terrible process. When we bring an engineer in that now has $150,000 of student debt, or $200,000 of student debt, and now we invest another $200,000 or $250,000 into them, so we got a $500,000 investment. I don't see much ROI. A $500,000 investment into an engineer takes decades to repay. What are your thoughts on being able to change that into the future?
I would quickly go back to the experiential learning model. So if we're really creating application-ready engineers because they've worked with you, we all have to deal with accreditation. So that is what it is. I'll put that off to the side. If you're running a technical university, you're dealing with accreditors. That's fact, not just Middle States for your university or college, but every technical program you have has its own accreditation body, and you're dealing with that. But if you can get that experiential learning out there so that we hear from all of our employers, we have an engineering advisory council that has 12 multinational businesses on it. I want an engineer who can come on the manufacturing floor with a wrench and know exactly what to do and solve the problem, right? Well, there's only one way to get that. I can't teach you that in a classroom. I've got to get you out there with you so that you can teach them while they're learning and maybe get an extra pair of hands to do a few things. And it doesn't cost you much because they're interns, right? Even our first year freshman, second semester engineers are on project teams out in the community doing engineering projects, mechanizing farms, working on new battery technology, and everything in between. Because we want them to be ready so that you don't have to spend that much of an investment in getting them to be application ready. And if you're lucky, you had a couple of ours on a project team or an internship, and they've already kind of learned your business practice, right? We also designed the new programs with input on how we ought to teach to get them ready to actually go into the workforce and be application ready. So the equipment we're using, the technology we're using, the way we're doing it was all feedback from the business community saying, yeah, because this is what we use in our R&D lab, Enersys, East Penn Battery, UGI, First Energy, so on and so on.
I think that I would add about our engineering programs at Penn State, and I will say this acknowledging I'm not an engineer by training, but certainly our engineering programs really focus on making sure that our students, through the experiences that they have in the classroom, through the experiences that they have in courses such as senior design, that they learn not only the theory of engineering, but also learn the application of it, and that they come out of their degree ready and able to adjust and adapt and grow in their field over time. And so it's that very specific teaching them the characteristics of thinking that enable that in the future. So that adaptability, what they may learn in their mechanical engineering degree may not be what they need to know to be successful in your shop, for example, but that they have the adaptive skills to come to the level that you need them to be.
All right, I've been given the signal that we got time for one more question, so we'll open the floor up to one more question.
Hello, John George. I'm a software engineer. You touched a little bit on certificates and micro degrees. Now, comparing those to the 4-year degrees, what's the biggest differences, and when would you recommend one over the other?
I don't know that I would recommend one over the other. I would say if it's let's say an entry to get started, to get some basic skills in place as a means of getting employed, to get a job, and then certainly following that up with more intensive training through a 2-year, 4-year program. To me, that would be the better track. I mean, I don't look at certificates as a one-bullet solution. I think it's more of a gateway issue to get folks into the workplace. But again, my thinking is you need to have a complete portfolio end-to-end that starts with a certificate program, whether it's credential bearing or not, all the way up to whatever you can offer as part of the total academic portfolio you have in the degree programs, and basically through that process of self-discovery and need-based skills development, determine whether you need to go on and make that determination. And I think employers are pretty good at telling you when you need to do that. And I think employees are pretty good at figuring out when they need to do it as well. Certainly that was my experience. So.
Yeah, we use the word stackable a lot, right? So you want stackable credentials so that one thing can roll into the next. And so that allows the individual or the employer or that combination to kind of figure out where you're going to enter and where you're going to exit and when you might re-enter and re-exit. So I think those things are great. And if you can make them stackable, I think you add value to it.
I think also it's important for industry and business to know that a student coming out is not going to know everything in that particular discipline, right? They're not going to know everything. And the way that you get students to know more in that realm is to do those up training, those short-term micro credentials and so on, that stackable opportunities. But I also think it's a mistake for people to think that it is one or the other. I think the fact is that employers want skills, for sure. They deserve skills. They need to have students that are prepared to go into the workforce and hit the ground running. But to say that a college education is not needed or in favor of a micro credential only is economically devastating to that person and that community if, in fact, over the long term, the college education is still worth its return on investment. You gauge what that is based on the cost of the institution, but it's an economically devastating consequence to not understand the value of what that college education means to you over your lifetime, right? Employers still are asking. 67% of employers in the United States still say bachelor's required. So, while we may be moving away from that a little bit, it's not disappearing. And that economic devastation over the lifetime of a non-college educated workforce is it's detrimental, I think.
Liz?
I was going to say we see them in both ways, both as kind of an entree into the university, if you will, as a small, discrete chunk that you use to kind of whet your appetite, if you will. But at the same time, we find that our current students really like them. And I think this is a characteristic of this generation, that they like them in terms of being able to say, in addition to earning a degree in engineering, I also have a micro-credential in leadership, or I also have a micro-credential in entrepreneurship. And that for them, that discrete body of knowledge that is less than, let's say, a minor, right, which at Penn State would be 18 credits, there we go into time, that smaller chunk, if you will, that smaller focus is very attractive to them. I have children who are the age of our college students, and we often laugh about, they're big field hockey players, and we often laugh about how they were always attracted by shiny metal things as kids, right? That you would go to a tournament on the weekend and you would get a medal at the end, and we find that interest in not the shiny metal thing per se, but that discrete body of being able to say to an employer, here's something I did, is very valuable to them, and something they feel strongly about.
All right, well, please join me in thanking our panel this afternoon for engaging.
Thank you.